Hello, my name is Jack Farrell. With me today is my colleague Bella Fazio. We are two membership engagement coordinators with Food Bank for New York City. Today, we're going to be covering the civil rights training associated with the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TEFAP, as updated in January of 2024. So for today's agenda, we're going to be covering a brief overview of what TEFAP is, give some historical context of civil rights coverage and legal authorities, as well as the areas of compliance associated with TEFAP. So the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TEFAP, is a federal program hosted by the Food and Nutrition Services branch of the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA. The goal of the program is to help supplement the diets of low-income Americans by providing them with emergency food assistance at no cost. Any food distributed through USDA programs are called USDA foods. All USDA foods, regardless of program, are 100% domestic. The USDA delegates an agency to each state to administer TEFAP programs in their state. These agencies are known as State Distributing Agencies, or SDAs. Now for some historical context and civil rights legal authorities. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, and any program or activity that receives federal funds or other federal financial assistance. The Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987 clarifies the scope of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities and programs that receive federal financial assistance. Americans with Disabilities Act Amendments Act of 2008 redefines and expands the American with Disabilities Act of 1990. Title IX of the Education Amendment of 1972 prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in any federal funded educational program or activity. Age Discrimination Act of 1975 prohibits discrimination on the basis of age in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. To continue, Executive Order 13166, improving areas of service for persons with limited English proficiency, in August 11 of 2000, requires federal agencies to examine the services they provide, identify any need for services to those with limited English proficiency, and develop and implement a system to provide those services so LEP persons can have meaningful access to them. USDA LEP policy guidance. Guidance to federal financial assistance recipients regarding the Title IX prohibition against national origin discrimination affecting persons with limited English proficiency, November 28, 2014, USDA Department Regulation 4330-002 prohibits discrimination in programs and activities funded in whole or part by USDA. FNS Instruction 113-1 in Appendix B for schools, SFSP and CACFP, and C for USDA Foods and TEFAP provide information on civil rights compliance and enforcement. 7 SFR Parts 15, 15A, and 15B, quote, non-discrimination, gives USDA agencies authority to develop civil rights requirements and prohibits discrimination in federally assisted programs or activities. 7 CFR Part 16, Equal Opportunity for Religious Organizations, gives equal footing to religious affiliated organizations. 7 CFR Parts 210 NSLP, 215 SMP, 220 SBP, 225 SFSP, 226 CACFP, or excuse me, 226 CACPFP, Food and Nutrition Services, USDA, regulations on children nutrition programs. 7 CFR Parts 250 USDA Foods and 251 TEFAP Regulations regarding food distribution of USDA foods. 28 CFR Parts 24 Non-discrimination and federally assisted programs covers non-discrimination on the basis of disability by state and local governments. Some more civil rights legal authorities. The Children Nutrition Programs, or CNP, Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act, the Child Nutrition Act of 1966, National School Lunch Program, Section 2 of the National School Lunch Act, as amended, established by the National School Lunch Program to safeguard the health and well-being of the national's children, to encourage the domestic consumption of nutritious agricultural commodities and other foods. Special Milk Program, Section 3 of the Child Nutrition Act, as amended, established the Special Milk Program to encourage the domestic consumption of fluid milk by children in nonprofit schools and institutions that do not participate in meal service programs authorized under NSLA or National Child Nutrition Act. School Breakfast Program, Section 4 of the Child Nutrition Act, as amended, established the School Breakfast Program to authorize payment to school states to assist the initiate, maintain, or expand nonprofit breakfast programs in schools. Summer Food Service Program, Section 13 of the NSLA, as amended, established the Summer Food Service Program to provide meals for children in needy areas during periods when the schools are not in session. Child and Adult Care Food Programs, Section 17 of the NSLA, as amended, established the CFP to initiate, maintain, and expand nonprofit food service programs for children or adults to participate in non-residential institutions that provide care. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TEFAP, Act of 1983, as amended. Assurances. To qualify for the federal financial assistance, the program application must be accompanied by a written assurance that the program or facility will be operated in compliance with the civil rights laws and implementing non-discrimination regulations. The civil rights assurance statement must be incorporated in all agreements between federal and state agencies, state and subrecipient agencies, and subrecipient agencies in their local states. What is discrimination? Different treatment which makes a distinction of one person or a group of persons from others, either intentionally or by neglect, or by actions or lack of actions. What is unlawful discrimination? Treating people differently does not necessarily constitute unlawful discrimination. Examples of non-unlawful discrimination. An employer can choose to hire one person instead of another based off merit, or a restaurant can turn people away if admission would cause the establishment to exceed its occupancy limits. Federally protected classes under TEFAP. For FNS programs, complaints are based on one or more of the following 6 federally protected bases. 1, race. 2, color, national origin. 4, age. 5, sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation. And 6, disability. Customer service and making a difference. It's important to treat people with dignity and respect. Answer all questions in a voice that is non-threatening. Clearly explain to everyone the rules as well as their rights and responsibilities. Find and use tools and techniques to improve customer service. Recognize that participants have varied needs and sometimes few resources. Notice when a person feels that they have been treated in a rude manner. Develop good listening skills. Learn to put yourself in their place when necessary. Learn to deal with a dissatisfied customer. Improve customer satisfaction. Ask yourself, am I treating this person in the same manner as I treat others? Conflict resolution, some key points. Typically, when customers who are behaving in a difficult manner usually have not had their expectations met or do not fully understand the role of the worker. Often, the customer is focused on getting immediate assistance when solving a problem and does not feel the worker is helping. Generally, people do not want to be difficult or argumentative with a caring individual. The customer may not be aware of how their negative behavior is affecting others. Conflict resolution again. Communication components to diffuse a difficult situation. You could use words, tone of voice, or body language. A combination of these components when having face-to-face interactions with customers. Each component says something to our customer. Conflict resolution. Tips for working with people during difficult situations. It's important to remain calm, state that you want to help, and ask how you can be of assistance. Use information provided, determine what the issue is. Take time to understand the person's point of view. Listen for details about the concern, situation, or request. Repeat the concern or request to make sure you understand the person's expectations. When appropriate, apologize for the situation. Offer solutions, take responsibility for finding a solution or putting a solution into action. Don't take the situation personally, and follow up. Personally, make sure that the customer has been satisfied and provide feedback. If you've tried to assist the person by providing the best customer service you can, and the person remains argumentative or outright abusive, then do not allow yourself to be abusive, and do not argue back. Keep your own sense of self-confidence and remain hopeful. Anytime you feel that someone is physically threatening, get away from the person and call the police. Public notification. All FNS assistance programs must include a public notification system. The purpose of the system is to inform applicants, participants, and potentially eligible persons of program availability, program rights and responsibilities, the policy of non-discrimination, and the procedures for filing a complaint. Elements of public notification. Program availability. Inform applicants, participants, and potentially eligible persons of the program's rights and responsibilities and the steps necessary for participation. Complaint information. Advise applicants and participants at the service delivery point of their right to file a complaint, how to file a complaint, and the complaint procedures. Non-discrimination statement. All information materials and sources, including websites, used by FNS, state agencies, local agencies, SFAs, and other subrecipients to inform the public about FNS programs must contain a non-discrimination statement. The statement is not required to be included on every page of the program's website. At minimum, the non-discrimination statement or link to it must be included on the home page of the program information. State agencies and their subrecipients must make program information available to the public upon request, properly display the Justice for All poster, inform potentially eligible persons, applicants, participants, and grassroots organizations of programs or changes in programs. Convey the message of equal opportunity in all photos and other graphics that are used to provide program or program-related information. Provide appropriate information and alternative formats for persons with disabilities and the appropriate languages for LEP persons. The non-discrimination statement. In accordance with federal civil rights laws and USDA Department of Agriculture, civil rights regulations and policies, this institution is prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, including gender, identity, and sexual orientation, disability, age, or appraisal or retaliation from prior civil rights activity. The program information may be available in languages other than English. Persons with disabilities who require alternative means of communication to obtain the program's information, examples being Braille, large print, audio tapes, or American Sign Language, should contact their responsible state or local agency that administers the program or USDA Target Center at 202-720-2600 or contact USDA through the Federal Relay Service at 800-877-8339. To file a discriminatory complaint, the complaint should complete a Form AD 3027 USDA Program Discrimination Complaint Form, which can be obtained online at usda.gov. For any USDA office, by calling 866-632-9962 or by writing a letter addressed to USDA. The letter must contain the complaint's name, address, telephone number, and a written description of the alleged discriminatory action in sufficient detail to inform the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights about the nature and date of the alleged civil rights violation. To complete AD 3027 form or letter must be submitted by USDA by 1. U.S. Postal Mail at USDA Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, 1400 Independence Avenue Southwest, Washington, D.C., or by fax at 833-256-1665 or 202-690-7442, or by email at program.intake@usda.gov. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. These next two slides are the same information, but in Spanish. So I will give you now a moment to capture this information. USDA non-discrimination statement, short version. Quote, this institution is an equal opportunity provider, end quote. The short version can be used in special circumstances only. Federal regulations allow the use of the shorter non-discrimination statement and a program material mentioning USDA if the content and intent is not vital to the program in nature. Examples being determination of eligibility, an agreement, an attestation, etc. Examples of allowable documentation would be brochures, menus, and flyers permitting that they meet previously mentioned criteria. Translation of the full non-discrimination statement in additional languages can be found on the FNS website. Justice for All poster must be displayed in a prominent location for all to view. AD 475A, new required version for TEFAP and child nutrition programs. Posters reflect current non-discrimination statements and new graphics. As of October 2023, new posters have not yet been published. Old posters still have the correct contact information and should be displayed until updated posters have been received. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague Bella, who will continue with some of the compliance regulations associated with TEFAP.
Race and ethnicity data collection. TEFAP is exempt from data collection per FNS Instruction 113-Appendix C, Section D, data collection and reporting. Remind me, what is discrimination? Discrimination is different treatment which makes a distinction of one person or a group of persons from others, either intentionally, by neglect, or by the actions or lack of actions. Federally protected classes under TEFAP include 1. Race, 2. Color, 3. National origin, 4. Age, 5. Sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation, and 6. Disability. A complaint of discrimination is when a neighbor claims that the recipient agency or staff at a recipient agency has treated them differently by distinguishing them from others. This treatment can be in action or verbal expression. Complaints of discrimination. Complaints shall be accepted and forwarded to the USDA. Complaints must be filed within 180 days from the alleged act of discrimination. Complaints may be written, verbal, or anonymous. State agencies or subrecipient agencies may develop their own complaint forms, but the use of such forms cannot be a prerequisite for acceptance. A separate civil rights complaint log shall be maintained by the state and subrecipient agency. Confidentiality is extremely important and must be maintained. What is your process for handling complaints of discrimination? 1. Have a plan in place. Staff must be prepared to know how to process potential complaints of discrimination within their organization. 2. At the very least, this process should include instruction to refer individuals to the And Justice for All poster on how to submit a complaint of discrimination. How to file a complaint directly with the USDA. To file a program discrimination complaint, you may obtain a complaint form by sending an email to cr-info or with the link below. You or your authorized representative must sign the complaint form. You are not required to use the complaint form. You may write a letter instead. If you write a letter, it must contain all of the information requested in the form and be signed by you or your authorized representative. Incomplete information will delay the process of your complaint. Employment civil rights complaints will not be accepted through this email address. Send your completed complaint form or letter to us by mail, fax, or email. For mail, addressed to U.S. Department of Agriculture, Director, Center for Civil Rights Enforcement, 1400 Independence Avenue, SW, Washington, D.C. 2025-9410. For fax, send to 202-690-7442. And for email, send to program.intake@usda.gov. For the Civil Rights Complaints Process USDA Discrimination Complaint Form, there's an English and Spanish version. For the English version, go to www.usda.gov/sites/default/files/documents/ad-3027.pdf. For Spanish, go to www.usda.gov/sites/default/files/documents/ad-3027s.pdf. For age-based complaints, refer to this memorandum. The memorandum provides guidance on the processing of discrimination complaints under the Age Discrimination Act of 1975, as amended 42 U.S.C. 6102. The Age Act is one of the federal civil rights laws enforced by FNS-CRD that prohibits age discrimination in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. Federal Regulation 45 CFR 90 provides general government-wide rules for the implementation of the Age Act. Last year, the department issued 7 CFR 15C, establishing the policy of non-discrimination on the basis of age in USDA programs and activities, and reinforcing the applicability of the policy to each FNS recipient. These regulations require that all complaints alleging Age Act violations be referred for mediation. Mediation involves the use of an impartial third-party mediator who assists the complainant and respondent in reaching terms that both parties find satisfactory without imposing a decision upon the parties. Mediation offers a faster and more creative resolution of complaints through informal dispute resolution methods, while minimizing expenses to the parties. All of the information obtained in the course of mediation is kept confidential. Participation in mediation is not optional, but mandatory for both the complainant and the state agency against whom the complaint is filed. 45 CFR 90.43C3, 7 CFR 15C.S(D). State agencies are not required to reach an agreement or settle the dispute, but must participate in the effort to reach a resolution on a good faith basis. For these reasons, it is important that every state agency administering FNS-assisted programs promptly refer all complaints to FNS-CRD that allege unlawful FNS-CRD, will then forward the complaints to the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services, FMCS, upon receipt. Concurring investigations of the complaint should not be conducted while FMCS performs mediation. This guidance memorandum should be shared with the program directors in your region and any state agency deemed appropriate to facilitate cooperation with FMCS and/or FNSCRD staff for compliance with Age Act requirements. If you have any questions, please contact Harriet Corngay at harriet.corngay@fns.usda.gov. Signed by Robert Contreras, Director of Civil Rights Division at the USDA. Signed April 7th, 2016. State agencies are responsible for training subrecipient agencies on an annual basis. Food banks are required to keep a training log documenting yearly trainings of food bank staff and volunteers. Subrecipient agencies are responsible for training their local sites, including frontline staff who interact with applicants or participants on an annual basis. RAs are required to keep a training log documenting yearly trainings of staff and volunteers. New employees must receive training before participating in program activities. Volunteers must receive training appropriate to their roles and responsibilities. All staff should receive training on all aspects of civil rights compliance, including collection and use of data, effective public notification systems, complaint procedures, compliance review techniques, resolution of noncompliance, requirements for reasonable accommodation of persons with disabilities, requirements for language assistance, conflict resolution, and customer service. Who are persons with limited English proficiency? These are individuals who do not speak English as their primary language and who have a limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. LEP and bilingual requirements. Title VI and its implementing regulations, Executive Order 13166, and federal agency guidance require federal agencies and subrecipients, aka state agencies, local agencies, or other subrecipients, to take reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to their programs and activities by limited English proficient persons, or LEPs. LEP and bilingual requirements. Factors to consider in addressing LEP. The number or proportion of LEP persons served or encountered in the eligible population, the frequency with which LEP individuals come in contact with the program, the nature and importance of the program activity or service provided by the program, and the resources available to the recipients and costs. LEP and bilingual requirements. Population data sources. For U.S. Census data, go to www.census.gov/programs-surveys/decade/2020-census/results.html. For the American Community Survey, go to www.census.gov/ACS. For the Migration Policy Institute's National Center on Immigration Integration Policy, go to www.migrationpolicy.org. And for the Department of Justice site, lep.gov, go to www.lep.gov/maps. The definition of disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such an impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. Major life activities means functions such as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, and working. Functions include functions of the immune system, normal cell growth, digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, cardiovascular, endocrine, and reproductive functions. Sections 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and USDA Implementing Regulation 7 CFR Part 15B prohibits discrimination based on disability in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. The Americans with Disabilities Act, (ADA), 28 CFR Part 35, Title II, Subtitle A, prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in all services, programs, and activities provided to the public by state and local governments. These civil rights laws protect persons with disabilities if they are potential applicants or participants in any FNS-funded programs. There is also an obligation to ensure that members of the public are provided accommodations in order to access program information, applications, and assistance, for example, Braille, large print, and audio tape. Providing qualified sign language interpreters for persons with hearing disabilities may be necessary to effectively communicate with these applicants and participants. Equal opportunity for religious organizations. 7 CFR Part 16 ensures a level playing field for the participation of faith-based organizations and other community organizations in USDA programs. Compliance reviews. Examine the activities of state agencies, subrecipients, and local sites to determine civil rights compliance. FNS civil rights and program staff review state agencies. FNS staff and state agencies review subrecipients. Subrecipients review local sites. Significant findings must be provided in writing to the reviewed entity and to FNS. How to file a complaint. Online, fill out a complaint form on the dhr.ny.gov website by answering all of the questions and signing the form. Type the form if possible. By mail. If you are filling out the form by hand, please print. You may send the form by postal mail to the regional office nearest you. By email or fax. Alternatively, you can email your complaints to complaints@dhr.ny.gov or fax it to 718-741-8322. Please remember to attach any copies of any documents you think will be helpful will help the division investigate the case. Example, pay stubs, letters of termination, performance evaluations, etc. Due to restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, you may return the complaint without notarization. Compliance reviews. There are 3 types of compliance reviews: pre-award compliance reviews, routine (post-award compliance reviews), and special compliance reviews. Pre-award compliance reviews are state agencies, subrecipient agencies, and local states must be in compliance with civil rights requirements prior to approval for federal financial assistance. Routine/pre-award compliance reviews. FNS and state agency must conduct routine compliance reviews as identified by FNS Instruction 113-1 and program-specific regulations policies. Sample post-award review questions are: do printed materials contain the non-discrimination statement? Is the "And Justice for All" poster displayed appropriately? Are program informational materials available to all? Have all frontline staff and volunteers received their yearly civil rights training? How are applicants and participants advised of their right to file a civil rights complaint of discrimination? And are reasonable accommodations appropriately made for people with disabilities? Special compliance reviews. They may be scheduled or unscheduled to follow. They may be to follow up on previous findings of noncompliance. They may be to investigate reports of noncompliance by other agencies, media, or grassroots organizations. They may be specific to an incident or policy. There may be a history of statistical underrepresentation of particular groups or a pattern of complaints of discrimination. Resolution of noncompliance, a factual finding that any civil rights requirement as provided by law, regulation, policy, instruction, or guidelines is not being adhered to by a state agency, subrecipient agency, or a local site. Steps must be taken immediately to obtain voluntary compliance. A finding's effective date is the date of notice to the reviewed entity. Verification of citizenship or immigration status should never give rise to discrimination. What are New York State's protected classes? The New York State human rights law states that every citizen has an equal opportunity to enjoy a full and productive life. The law prohibits discrimination in employment, housing, credit, place of public accommodation, volunteer firefighting, non-sectarian educational institutes, and retaliation for filing a discrimination complaint. This law is enforced by the New York State Division of Human Rights, DHR or Division, through the investigation, hearing, and resolution of complaints filed by individuals against alleged discriminators. If you believe you are a victim of unlawful discrimination that is not one of the 6 federally protected classes, but is a class protected by New York State, you may file a complaint with the New York State Division of Human Rights at www.dhr.ny.gov. The 18 New York State protected classes are 1. Race, 2. National origin, 3. Sex, 4. Domestic violence victim status, 5. Predisposing genetic characteristics, 6. Retaliation for opposing unlawful discriminatory practices, 7. Creed, 8. Sexual orientation, 9. Age, 10. Disability, 11. Gender identity or expression, 12. Pregnancy-related condition, 13. Color, 14. Military status, 15. Marital status, 16. Lawful source of income housing only, 17. Prior arrest or conviction record, and 18. Familial status. For contact information, go to the New York State Office of General Services Food Distribution at 93 Broadway, Manans, New York, 12204. For the phone number, call 518-474-5122. For fax, call 518-486-5660. The email is ogsdonatedfoods@ogs.ny.gov. The website is ogs.ny.gov/USDA-food-distribution. That concludes the TEFAP civil rights training.